Hello everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott and I've been playing God of War Ragnarok, and you will very soon too, which is why I wanted to put together an AMA, a question and answer style video, where you can just ask the reviewer very specific things and they'll all be delivered with zero spoilers. Now I put this out over on the YouTube community page. I also asked on my Twitter exactly what people want to know, so let's get through as many questions as we can. First question from Zico Productions, who says, should I play the 2018 game for a refresher on the combat and controls, or does the game ease you in? Thankfully, God of War Ragnarok does have a recap on the main menu, so you can just dive into that and get all the basic stuff that happened in the original game. It's not that in-depth, but it does focus on what happened with Atreus, so you do have access to various things in regards to his power set and things that happened in the original game that were awoken inside him, and that directly went into the mystery that we left off with at the end of that game in regards to being the word Loki being mentioned for him, and that sort of professorial side of it and what's going to happen in Ragnarok. So it's a very surface level take on the 2018 game. I would still massively recommend it overall. But yeah, the game does have you covered if you're diving in fresh too. Next question from Tools and Tech, who says, does God of War Ragnarok make use of the Dualsense? I just finished Astro's Playroom thanks to me for the recommendation and loved how much it used the haptics, etc. Yes, I mean, this game, I didn't notice it that much, but I'm also not a Dualsense guy. Josh is a Dualsense guy, picking up on everything. However, God of War Ragnarok does have Dualsense stuff, even in the menus. It kind of feels like you're sort of, buttoning over or motioning over like a scroll, like sort of elevated letters on a scroll or something as you're going down through the menus, which is kind of cool. But I feel like God of War overall, the North Saga stuff is already incredibly satisfying. The likes of the Leviathan axe was already incredibly satisfying to just grab even with standard controller vibration. So all that stuff enhanced with the DualSense, it is in there. Like, you are feeling various things in regards to doing finishes or pulling off giant slams, or that move that Kratos does where you aim, throw the axe and then catch it in midair and slam it down again. That comes with a big old controller explosion. So stuff like that is very, very satisfying, especially if you have the controller speaker on as well. So you have a little bit of audio component coming out of your controller as well. Next question from Sour Waffles, who says, are the bosses cool this time around, or is it super repetitive and the same boss over and over like the last game? Also, is exploration better and less tedious? So this game, Ragnarok, does have a equivalent of the Valkyries. There is something out there that I'm not going to give away what it is, and that is kind of the same enemy over and over again. However, they do attack you in different ways, and maybe they have different weapons, maybe you fight two of them at once, they have different tactics and different timing windows to overcome them, but you can kind of feel like they were put in the game to be, this version of the Valkyries. I've not found anything like Sigrun, which is interesting. I'm just kind of doing my big 100% run now, so I guess we'll see how those things come together, because a lot of people, if they could surmount beating Sigrun in the 2018 game, that was kind of like a badge of honor. I never beat Sigrun. I did everything else in that game bar finding all of Odin's ravens and beating Sigrun, and even Josh gave up beating Sigrun, which that dude beats everything. And so yeah, I feel like maybe in this game either they've learned from that and they don't want to be, don't want to be giving people such a roadblock boss. They want to make sure that people can actually get the platinum or see every part of the game without being too stressed out. But yeah, I've not 100% at the game yet, so maybe there's something out there that me or you will find as we're exploring further. In terms of exploration, this is really interesting. I mentioned this in the review. They do sort of gamify a lot, bigger portions of the game overall, like the different parts of the levels, to the point where, you're sort of doing things that you recognize as gamified elements, like, oh, we need to, stop this water flow by putting some ice there to make sure that this geyser goes higher, or we need to be pulling these levers, or whatever it is, moving this sort of reflective part of the world, the level around, so we can, reflect an axe off one thing to trigger something else. Very gamified, but they're incredibly satisfying. I do find, a light sprinkling of puzzle elements in any sort of open world action game can go a long way. I feel like they don't overdo it. I feel like those things are, like I said, satisfying enough and do vary up what you're doing. However, that idea of there's nearly always some sort of puzzle element in there does mean that if you weren't a fan of that in the 2018 game, or you can identify it as a more gamified element here, that could be quite off-putting. At the same time though, the best character dialogue is all in the side missions. Like, that's when you're spending the most time with the side characters, especially Atreus and Mamiya, and there's lots of things fleshed out in regards to Mamiya. So I think that it's worth spending time in those side quests, but in terms of what you'll be doing, sometimes that is just a big old video game. There's also some Ubisoft elements thrown in here too, where it's just, go find 7 of these things, go find, various collectibles in the open world. Satisfying enough, and it's almost a testament to just how much ground Ubisoft have covered, just how much of the open world market is now identified as a signature Ubisoft thing. But at the same time, my mind went there when I was just mopping stuff up, and I hazard to guess a lot of other people will too. Next question from Jack Asbury, who says, are you more rewarded for having played every game in the series as opposed to just 2018? Yes, massively. As much as I think that you can get a hell of a lot out of the newer games, the 2018 one and this one, and I know that Josh and WhatCulture Gaming, ex-WhatCulture Gaming, and new PlayStation Access member Ash Millman went in completely fresh to God of War 2018, having not played the Greek saga beforehand, and still absolutely loved those games. Yes, they absolutely work as everything that Kratos has been through, and this idea of this sort of haggard once warrior trying to be a father, and all the different philosophies that come from that, and the general mindsets that come from that are still very, very engaging. However, I do think there's something very unique here. That was almost like what happened with Uncharted 4, where if you have those memories yourself, if you've grown up with the franchise, we're talking about 17 years of a franchise at this point. In pop culture, it was a whole different thing in the 2000s. The amount of games that were just steering into over-the-top gore and blood and guts and whatever, all the different tenets that made up what God of War used to be, and the idea that the development team, the specific creatives, the likes of Cory Barlog, have grown up. They worked on those original games. He went from God of War 2 working alongside David Jaffe all the way through to being the director, the creative director of the last two games in the saga. That is fascinating in itself. And what kind of lessons has he learned as an individual? Has the team learned overall? Ragnarok does have a new director. Creative director is Cory Barlog. Director is Eric Williams. And it's just that idea of a team aging over time. What do they want to say about this character? They've spent more time with him than any of the rest of us. And I think that they've crafted one hell of a story here in Ragnarok, but I do think it's bolstered by the reality of growing up with that character yourself if you happen to be there from the start. Question from Cat from the Kong, who says, does the game still take itself incredibly seriously? Now I picked this question out to talk about because it's kind of interesting just how much of an MCU influence or wider entertainment influence is in the game. Not something I'm going to touch on in regards to spoilers, but in terms of the character writing, you have the likes of Kratos, Freya, Mamiya, speaking in a more sort of regal tone, speaking in a way that feels more like they're from Norse mythology or a fantasy representation of Norse mythology, whereas the likes of Atreus and Agrabah, to mention two characters that have been revealed in trailers, they talk way more like they're just teenagers from this realm, from our world right now, 2022, and they're saying things like, I got this, you got this, and just the way that they talk to each other is way more carefree. And it's not that stuff isn't charming and enjoyable and refreshing, and I feel like it fleshes out what God of War is in quite a unique way in that context. I did notice it, and it's not that I think that it's that jarring, but it's noticeable. And I feel like the overall tone, the overall message of the new God of Wars was to be better than the old gory games, and to make something better, make something bigger overall. And it's that whole question of whether is the only way to do that to write characters in a way that is lining up with the MCU as this massive entertainment dominating juggernaut, or should they have done something else? Also, massive shout out to Sung Won, who voices Ratatoska in this game. I don't know Sung Won whatsoever, but I'm a huge fan of his work, and I was just popping myself silly realizing that was his voice. I was pretty sure it was him when the character starts talking to you, and then realizing that guy has managed to get his voice into a God of War game was just absolutely awesome. But still, you can kind of fold that in. The idea of a big talking squirrel, or the idea of a shopkeep who has a sort of an octopus that sort of obeys his command sitting on his shoulder. Quirky characters being thrown into this context. Some people will love them. I think some people might find them a little bit jarring. But yes, the game overall, God of War overall, does not take itself as seriously as in titles gone by. Question from You Done Messed Up Aaron, who says, have they improved enemy variety? Now I mentioned this a lot in the review, that after about the 15-hour mark, things really change. I'm not going to tell you why that is. But I did notice the same enemy encounters over and over again in that first sort of 10 to 15-hour mark. It's not that they dominate the whole thing. There is obviously enemy variety overall, but you will find yourself going up against various creatures that almost look like they're sort of made of mud, and all they do is throw out all these little tiny critter enemies that just do chip damage and poke at you over and over again. I feel like I had that encounter way more times than I wanted to, and I was very glad to see the back of them when they started to go away towards the second half of the game overall. So yes, overall enemy variety, definitely, but I feel like there are a handful of creatures they throw at you a bit too much in the first, let's say, 10 to 15 hours. Question from Willie Araya, who says, how more varied is the combat compared to the previous game? Not asking specifically about new blah, as those are spoilers. Very, very true. The whole debate is doing the rounds as to whether the idea of a new acquisitional thing in God of War Ragnarok that's not story-based is a spoiler, but I'll just stay away from that for now. But overall, in terms of combat, they've added quite a lot of things to the core feel of 2018's game. In regards to, various encounters take place at multiple levels, so you can press circle and just whip out one of the Blades of Chaos and jump up to a different level. And also there are different things that you can interact with contextually. Maybe there's like a tree just sticking out the ground that'll just have a circle prompt on it. You can just grab that tree and smash a dude with it. Or maybe there's like a rock or something, like a big boulder, that Kratos can just grab and fling at someone else. So things like that keep it fresh. You also have, on top of that, various things that focus on the idea of elemental build-up, holding triangle with the Leviathan axe to build up frost damage, so you can build that up on an enemy's life bar and then do more damage once they're fully inflicted with frost. You can do the same thing with fire with the Blades of Chaos. However, that weapon's signature move is pressing triangle faster and faster to whip the blades around and then unleash a really cool attack. So there are things like that. I feel like Ragnarok is a nice expansion of what was there before. However, if you didn't like the combat in the 2018 game, I would be surprised if this got you in. It is faster, it is snappier, but you are re-unlocking all the same moves that you had in the original game. And if we're actually quantifying the amount of new moves given to you, I feel like that's a lot less than Kratos' overall moveset. If we pie charted to this, the majority is what you had in the original game, re-unlocked, and then added on with all the elemental attacks and all the different triangle moves that you can do, etc. But like I said, if you're a fan before, you're still a fan. If you weren't a fan before, I don't think this will get you in. Question from Rich Homie Kwanzaa, who says, the dead ice giant scene in the middle of God of War was my first real whoa moment that I had in terms of scale in the first game. Is there anything akin to that in Ragnarok? Now, I'm not going to be giving away any spoilers whatsoever, but I will say yes. I will say that for me, the biggest whoa moments were entirely related to the realms themselves and the way the realms are presented. There are certain camera angles, there are certain depictions of the realms that are just staggering on a game design level, on an art direction level, on a cinematography level. Things where you're just presented with a gorgeous vista, a gorgeous representation or depiction of a certain realm, and then just going, I have no idea how they rendered this. I have no idea how they made this come to life. Is every single part of this rendered? Is there a painting in the background, like a texture that's becoming 3D modeling as it gets closer to me? I have no idea, and not knowing is one of the most magical, wondrous parts of playing a video game in the first place, when teams like Sony Santa Monica get things this much right. So I will say yes, mostly relating to the overall presentation and the graphical punch that this game has. But yes, there are also all sorts of various, oh my god, this is incredible moments in there too. Question from Blackheart XCII, whatever that is in Roman numerals, who says, can you still switch the buttons back to the classic buttons, so square and triangle as attack as opposed to R1 and R2? You can't. You can switch the circle and X buttons around in the main menu. You can't do the, if you want to switch the attack buttons, you can't do that officially. You could do that on the PlayStation console menu. You could remap R1 and R2 to triangle and circle if you really, really wanted to. However, you'd be giving up a lot of camera control, which is one of the reasons that the control scheme changed in the first place. You want to be able to use the right stick to see people coming in and manage enemies and things like that. But you can switch evade and interact. If you would rather evade on X and interact with circle, you can do that in one of the main menus. You can also assign the touchpad to do various things when you swipe it in any of the four directions, because they've gotten rid of a 180 turn on down on the D-pad. If you want to do a 180 turn, you now have to map that to a downward swipe on the touchpad, which feels pretty weird, to be honest, but it works if you really, really need. Question from Ichito82, who says, will Mamiya be telling me stories while on a boat/sled? I used to just sit back and listen. Yes, very, very much so. Mamiya is very chat happy in this game. I feel like Mamiya, Kratos, and Atreus' bond has only become stronger, which means that he has even more things to tell them. And so any realm that is full of, water, any realm that gives you a boat to just travel around in and has a more relaxed feel to it, where it's like, we have a mission design, we have a mission thing we need to get to, but we can just take our time. Mamiya has tons to say. To be honest, that dude does not shut up, even to the point where I kind of want him to let Kratos and Atreus talk to each other more and argue about a few things in regards to what they're supposed to be doing story-wise, and even Mamiya will just keep interrupting them and just being like, brothers, calm down, it's fine, let me tell you another tale of Odin or whatever. So yes, basically, if you like that side of the game, it is very much here, and that stuff is populated way more in the first 10 to 15 hours before the switch, let's say, the thing that I think is the propellant in the narrative. Whilst you're waiting for that, you can enjoy as much Mamiya as you want. Quick question from Liquid Pliskin, how many times does Kratos say, boy? He's kind of swapped out the boy. Boy is very much rationed out. It is replaced entirely by brother. Kratos busts out a couple of brothers. Mamiya says brother every 20 seconds. And I'm a big advocate of the brother in casual conversation. But I got one thing for the comments, or for general reception after launch. Does Mamiya say brother too much in this game? Question from Frank, who says, are the gems and the upgrade system together with the armors as useless and tiresome as in the first game? I wouldn't say that they're useless or tiresome, but it's the same feeling. You know, this idea of Sony Santa Monica have built this incredible blockbuster summer action game feel that you can just go get lost in. And if you want to do all the upgrade path stuff, the sort of power play stuff of maximizing your weapons and your armor and your abilities, and really making sure you're getting the most out of, maxing all the bars and everything out. For me, all that stuff is optional. I feel like in the original game, that was kind of resigned to, do you want to do the mist trials, or what the hell that thing was called? I think it was in Niflheim in the original game, or the Muspelheim trials as well. Do you want to max out all your abilities to take those things on? All that stuff is still there. The Muspelheim trials return in this game, so if you want to get lost in that stuff, you absolutely can. They're bigger, they're more fleshed out. But what they have done here is made sure that if you're using one weapon over and over again, you will get access to modifiers for specific attacks. So something like the Leviathan axe, when you hold R2, its standard move is just burying it in a dude and then doing a launcher. Now, if you use that axe enough, you'll be able to go into the abilities window and add on stun damage or extra damage or elemental buildup. So it's kind of factoring into the idea of stunning groups of enemies or building up elements in general, whilst you're charging your Leviathan axe for the next attack, making sure that you're building up elementals overall to do the most damage and overcome, sub bosses, mini bosses, whatever. All that stuff I kind of just view as an extra wrinkle to the core combat, because I feel like the meat and potatoes of God of War Ragnarok is very similar to God of War 2018 in the best way possible. It's an incredible combat model. But if you don't want to get involved in that stuff, you can just enjoy the vast majority of everything else that's on offer. Final question from Michael Barrett, who says, are there great bosses like the Fenris Wolf or Nidhogger, or mythological creatures besides the gods? Obviously no spoilers in this game, however I will say that my favorite moments overall, the stuff that was absolute 5-star quality, the stuff that I was just, oh my god, this is some of the best visuals meets music meets thematics meets just general depictions of visuals on screen, are all related to the boss fights. Those things are just incredibly done. And I think it's really worth shouting out just how much, God of War 2018 pioneered this idea of one camera the whole time, one take, let's say, following Kratos all the way around through his adventure without really any real cuts, unless you're doing fast travel or whatever. The idea of applying that to cinematography in a boss fight and just following Kratos or following the different things that are happening in a boss fight, all without breaking any of the actual cuts, that stuff is super, super impressive. I think that those are the things that people are just going to remark on a game design level and just be like, how the hell did you guys code this? How the hell did you pull this off? And make it feel so controllable and yet so guided from the game side sometimes, factoring in a quick time event that then goes back into regular gameplay, that then goes into a cutscene or whatever. That side of the game, that spectacle side of God of War, is better than it's ever been. And yeah, it's only backed up by when it's allowed to really show off, which tends to happen in some of the biggest boss fights in the game. So there you go, little thing between me and you. This was my second overall version of this because the camera kind of ate the first one, which just kind of sucks. But let me know what you think down in the comments below of God of War Ragnarok. I know you're still waiting to play the game, but let me know your general excitement levels and what you're looking forward to seeing in the game. What are your predictions for the story overall? For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com. Thank you very, very much for listening and watching, and I'll catch you soon.